Hi, welcome to the fourth part of our lecture on the depressions and crisis in Marxian economics. And in this part, mainly, we will talk on the Galilean model and maybe start to the next chapter where we will see the third layer of the economic system. If we want to reach to our time limit earlier than that. And I have already mentioned that in Galilean model, basically the P over Y and Y over Z, the profit share and the realization problem, degree of realization, are the two dynamics that are actually creating the crisis. Although the active one is pretty much the distribution of income, the passive one is degree of realization in this case. So the basic dynamic of crisis is like this. At the right after a crisis has initiated, you have a low realization because the companies are not able to sell what they have produced. And however, the profits, the profit share is high because there is a high unemployment, which allows you to decrease the wages and basically increase your profit share. Basically, let's start from a new. Let's say this is profit share, and let's say this is Y over Z. At the onset, you have this one low, let's say 10, this one relatively high, let's say 100. So your profit rate, keeping the well, keeping the capital amount constant, the let's say the Z over K constant, at least let's say the profit you got from the potential output will be equal to 1000. But in order to find profit rate, you need to have one more calculation where you should basically multiply this with let's also write this Z over K. Let's say this is constant at, let's say, 10. So now we also need to multiply these. Of course, these all should be ratios. I'm sorry for that. So this be 0. 0.7, 0.1, and 0.5, for example. So, well, let's make this especially high. So basically, rise in the profit, profit share is one thing that will carry profit rate up continuously. To see that, you might basically just, let's say, I'm just adding this one to this one, 0.05, and I'm keeping this one also constant. Well, as my profit rate starts to increase, basically my profit rate, profit rate starts to increase, and realization rate falls. But at some point, it will stay stable. But the crisis will continue to make the profit share rise. So as the profit rate rise, so in the end, profit rate starts to rise, and as profit rates starts to reach to some point, the companies will start to make investments. But when they start to make investments, now basically the realization rate will also start to rise. As companies demand more, they produce more, basically, and this will also start to eat up the reserve army. So basically what you have is, in the second stage, realization will rise, profit share will maybe stay stable for a moment, but then starts to decrease, but profit amount starts to increase. Let's say profit share, profit amount will start to increase, and profit rate will also starts to continue to increase. You might think it like this. Okay, the profit share is now decreasing by 0.05, maybe at a lower rate, but this rate starts to now this rate will now starts to increase by 0.05 maybe. So, well, as you see, this is increasing my profit rate further up. Even though my realization rate is increasing, my profit share is decreasing. The fact that my realization rate is increasing my profit rate. But will it continue forever? Let's continue this process. Well, my profit rate is still increasing. Well, after a certain point, as you see, once my profit share has decreased below a certain amount, which is again caused by too high, too large, too small reserve army, since this increase in production activity investments, which is increasing the realization rate, at the same time is taking out my reserve labor force and decreasing my reserve army size. In the end, basically, the decrease in my reserve army size and decrease in my profit share as a result will dominate the increase created by the realization rate, and this will start to decrease my profit rate. I'm sorry, this is what we should open. Well, once basically it starts to dominate the profit rate, well, profit starts to decrease. Well, at first maybe investments might continue, but we will come to a point, let's say this is the point, which might be a later point by the way, but let's say this is the point at which the companies will just stop investing. Because I mean they realize that the profits are too low, so basically their profit rate is not allowing them to invest because they don't have sufficient level of funds. So at that point, the realization rate starts to fall. Why? Because now companies are not investing. This is decreasing demand, and basically, and as a result, also companies won't be able to sell their products, so they will basically lay off their workers, and as they lay off workers, basically, the consumption demand will decrease also. But this increases the profit share because now reserve army size is increasing. So basically, the companies are getting advantage over the workers, and they are able to get a higher level of profit share. So, however, once this process has started, the decrease in demand, well, well, in this framework, actually, you might have the well, you might have this decrease in reserve army dominating. But let's make this fall in the investments sphere. Well, in that case, basically, initially the realization rate will fall fast. Reserve army will basically increase relatively more slowly. But at the end, you will come to a point where realization rate will fall to a relatively low value, and basically it will stay there because the demand can only decrease this much. And when you come to that value, basically, what will happen is, well, the realization will remain low. Maybe it is falling further back, but its rate of decrease will become smaller and smaller. While this large reserve army makes increase profit share faster and faster. So you will have a certain point where this will remain more or less stable, but this will continue to rise, the profit share, let's say. And this remains stable. So now profit rate starts to rise back again. But of course, initially that rise might be small, but you will come to a point where that increase in profit rate is large enough to make companies start their investments again. And this will again create the demand, and the whole process will start again. So, this is the math of it. To summarize it again, initially realization rate is low, profit share is high, which basically makes the profits increasing because profit share dominates the realization. Profit share increase becomes more dominant compared with the effect of low realization rate. As profits increase, companies start to invest, which will increase realization, decrease profit share, but initially realization rate becomes dominant, and profit starts to increase further. At some point, realization will be high, but profit share is so low, which will start to decrease the profits basically. As profit starts to decrease, however, the realization rate now starts to fall, which initially again dominates, and profit share increased, but at some point profit share starts to dominate the realization, and again, well, as long as the realization rate dominates, profits decrease. At some point, profit share will start to dominate the realization, and then profit starts to increase again. So this continuous disproportionate, continuous problem between the realization and the distribution are actually two factors that are connected and that are creating these cycles. Well, there's an alternative Keynesian cycle actually to that, and there actually the main problem becomes the investment behavior of the companies. Investment and consumption disproportionateness. Companies basically invest, hoping that consumption will increase, but at some point investments go too far, and basically there is not sufficient number of people who consume it, and suddenly they need to fall short. So consumption also starts to decrease, but investments fall too short of consumption. So consumption remains high enough to get sufficient level of profits for the remaining investments after the crisis. So this existing consumption will make the companies reinvest, but the investments again go too high, so they don't find enough consumers, and then again they will go down again. This is another type of crisis. To be fair, actually, Marx also mentions this disproportionateness of investment consumption, and basically the demand that is suddenly created, and the demand basically gets lost, basically. So that's, as I said, that's another explanation of them. That's another explanation of this middle layer of crisis. So both Keynesian school and the Marxian school have several different models on this middle layer of the crisis, basically. In addition to this this surface layer described by the Minsky. Well, now the next discussion will be on potential third layer. Not everyone agrees the existence of this potential third layer. We will see why. And among those people are some of them more fundamentalist Marxists, some of them are maybe more close to the Keynesian view. And the discussion may become very, very severe between those people, basically. So this is our next discussion, this potential third layer. So see you in that part.